So my only challenge that I'm having here is I don't just want to see me, I want to see the slideshow that's on my screen, but it's on the background. Let's see, audio, video, show my screen. Inbox. So to all of you listening in, right now, I'm attempting to get my email closed and get into, geez, oh, Pete. I can't, I was getting ready to email you that, Lindsay, so that's why I opened up my email. And it's, oh, I know why it's pissed. It's pissed because it wants to know if I want to save the message. No, I've got my screen working. Okay, and there it is for Great Plains. All right, so what are people seeing as an audience? That's what I'm wanting to know now. Do you see me and the PowerPoint or the?
Yes, we see them.
Normally I have. Yeah. Normally I can see what the audience is seeing, and right now I can't see that. So. Strange. All right. Because when you popped up, you had I could see your beautiful email box. But people can see the, whoa, any questions? That's like the very end, 46 of 46. Da, 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 da. All right. Is there a way to, yeah, I know that we can do that. What I'd like to do is also be able to have people ask questions, because with only 3 other coaches, you know, let's let them be yakking at each other. Okay, you can see both. And audio, attendees, staff. Well, I guess as technology tries to win here, I'd just like to start and say thanks to the coaches that are attending here. Do you want to record this, Linz? Oh, it is being recorded.
Yes,
right,
yep.
So we can see that too. All right. I was thinking about making a special one for Great Plains, because my roots in coaching go back to Region 8, which when I would play volleyball, I would have to drive 12 hours to get to a gym in Kansas City or Lincoln, and we'd play side out scoring, and we never got to go to the player parties because we were playing at midnight, you know, because we were in the finals. And then I do summer camps, and I did hundreds, probably 300 of my camps of 500 were done in the Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri area. So not only have I detasseled corn as part of my fun, but I've had a really big chance to change and speed up, sort of accelerate the way we learn. And this slide, I decided that rather than make a special Great Plains one, I'd go with a slideshow I did in December for the top coaches, Olympic and on down, for US sailing. My reason for doing that, I think, will come clear as we show you what we're going to kind of ponder here, and that is principles carry across all sports. And if you have to be a sailing coach where you can't be in the boat and you can barely yell at somebody across the jetty or whatever, how do you teach somebody sailing? It makes our job a lot easier. And this was their highest rated presentation in 10 years. So I kind of went, all right, well, that seemed to work, and so let's make it happen. So I really would, though, like to be able to see the questions, Lynn's, from everybody. So you
I believe underneath the
have any
web chat
questions,
tab.
put it in the chat,
Yeah, you can use chat, or there's a questions tab that I think you can type, anyone can type answers into.
All right. So next slide. Come on. There we go. No, that's not moving to the next slide. Next slide. The challenges of being, up at, so I've got a lag because I'm at 9,000 feet in the Colorado mountains working at our veteran first responder ranch. And sort of self-quarantining out here with my son, who had a chance to be here in a rare thing because he went from being a pro player in Germany, MVP on a Sunday, to Tuesday, we're going to play with no fans, to Wednesday, we're canceling the league, to turning his car in and flying back that next Sunday. So the delays are kind of frustrating here, but time is what we want the most, but we use worst. So this is going to be a lot about how do we become more efficient and effective. That's really what coaching is often about, simply based on the fact that we only have a couple hours or time. Here's what U.S. Sailing has, and I was thinking this is kind of cool because we don't have to worry about our kids drowning, or getting lost at sea and not being able to come back or anything like that. So they've got a lot of parallel worlds to the way they do Olympic sailing and things. In person, you have a couple things, but this one I wanted to keep because I wanted you to see what is called a nose flute. And whether you do it online or you get your kids back together, the challenges of playing this plastic thing that costs about $1 is hysterical, and it's fun to watch who can play it first. And if you have any problems with it, let me know, because I'll teach you how to play one. But you blow through your nose and you make the sounds in your mouth, and it's pretty hysterical. This is a document that I have that to the two that have joined us here, I'd be happy to email it to you. It's somewhat of a private article, but it's 15 pages. You can see how tiny all the words are. This is sort of the summary of what I've learned over the 50 years that I've been coaching. And I keep them all in this sort of document. As I get a new idea, I throw it in there. And because of my retirement coming up, and because Great Plains has a sort of a special place in my heart, I'd be happy to share it to the coaches that have joined us here officially. The word Ancora is important. Every great teacher and coach does this. And who taught it to me was a guy named Michelangelo. And the Italian, I played in Italy professionally, and I love the Italian culture, and with the words Ancora Imparo, it means still learning. And Michelangelo was on top of his stack in the Sistine Chapel at the age of like 87, and he leaned down to his staff and he goes, Ancora Imparo, which means still learning. And that's pretty cool that probably the greatest painter ever at the age of 87 felt that he was still learning. And that's the sign of what I hope those attending this webinar have a chance to experience. The other thing is another Latin phrase, Citius Altius Fortius, in this case, a Latin phrase. That's the Olympic motto. That's on a medal here from LA when we won our first gold medal at USA Volleyball for the men. And that is swifter, higher, stronger, because it's all about this there's only one gold medalist that is the fastest. Everybody else is working on their and that's something that I use as a topic to tell stories with my athletes. There's another Latin phrase that I think matters, and that is primum non nocere, and that's from the Hippocratic Oath that you see on the slide. That's what a great doctor does, and at times I worry that coaches don't understand that they physically or they mentally are harming their kids instead of taking the sport and making it be of great value for that it can bring, especially volleyball. Come on. There we go. Ooh. Now back to the future. A lot of what I'm going to share in this next hour or so are facts and not opinions. And that's because research shows how do we learn faster and more effectively. And it's not how I was coaching 50 years ago. I guarantee you. It's absolutely not. Come on, you can change slide thing. I'm hitting you. Jeez, oh Pete, this is frustrating. All right. So when they threw me in the Hall of Fame at the AVCA for coaches, I told them what my record was, with 10,000 plus wins and only about 30 plus losses. And the other people all laughed. And I said, you see, I don't know how many matches I've won or lost. All I know is that out of the 10,000 kids I've coached, 35 or 37 have quit volleyball after I coached them. And that's my losses. In other words, to those of you listening here today, if you go 0 and 50 or 0 and 30 in high school, or you go and don't win 3 or 4 tournaments in a row, don't not only win, you lose every match, but every kid plays volleyball the next year, you've done a really good job coaching. And it's this process that we're kind of wrestling with here today. It's not the outcome of winning the tournaments. So keep that in mind as I judge you on never being a child's last coach. That's the challenge I'm going to issue to you here today. Now, I have a friend who's a heart surgeon, a friend who's an orthopedic surgeon, and a friend who is a brain surgeon. And the three of them were watching a volleyball practice a couple of 2-3 years ago. And they had kids that had been in volleyball for a decade. And they said, damn, these guys are still doing the same thing that my first daughter did 10 years ago. And they said, each of them, if I practice medicine now the way I did 5 years ago, the brain surgeon friend said, I think I only have a 2-year cycle. If I'm doing something that people were doing 2 years ago now, I should be sued for malpractice. So that's that again, always learning. And I'm going to recommend a book called Atul Gawande's Notes on a Surgeon's Performance, and it's called Better. And it'll be in the slideshow at the end, but I just saw Atul Gawande on MSNBC talking about the virus, and he is an incredibly great surgeon teacher, and that's a motor skill. Hey, how do you perform a motor skill of brain surgery? That's a motor skill. So this question you may have seen before. It's part of Impact if the instructor does it live, but the question is who this, is this? And the answer is this is the ideal coach who listens and sees a lot and talks not as much as they probably used to as they become a better teacher and coach along the way. So I could have maybe put this as the first slide, but I'm not here to criticize anybody. I'm here to just provide information. If I criticize anybody, it's going to be me, and especially the young John coach that wasn't as good as I thought I was when I first started doing it. But again, this is not about right or wrong, or it's not a black or white thing. I'm going to give you ideas as we go through here about being more effective and more efficient. And that's what really is the most important thing to be a good coach. Thought this was a pretty cool thing this summer, past summer now. We got 40 different national governing bodies and all these other people together. You can see US Sailing, you can see USA Volleyball, and we're all collaborating on how to be more effective coaches in a program with the US Coaching Education, as well as the US Olympic Committee. Please go to Google and type in US Olympic Committee or US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, ADM. You can add the words American Development Model after this time is over, and you will see a tremendous amount of information that all these sports are working hard together to make us be better teachers. Come on. Why aren't you clicking? So there's a webinar that I suggest, if you haven't watched it, to take the 45, and it's probably about a 75-minute webinar. It's called The Game Trains the Brain. And I rather like it because it was done with a Dr. Steve Bain, who's actually a head coach at the college level, but he works at the University of Washington in the neuroscience department. And he got me to really best clearly understand many years ago how we're not training the body, we're really just training the brain to do all this stuff. And that it's a learning competition, not an athletic one. You know, oh, we won. No, if you learn more effectively and efficiently, you're going to be beating teams that are equal to you and even teams that are better than you. The quote that you see here, of course, is from Karch. And Karch has become an awesome coach because he's constantly learning. And in learning, coaches recognize that you're going to fail. And in failure, that's part of the learning process, even the coach. So one of the coolest things is to see Karch in the national team gym sort of admit failure and say, I screwed that up, or that wasn't good enough, or whatever. And he points out that if I expect my athletes to learn and be comfortable with failure, I have to do the same thing as a coach. But it's, again, about the science that affects what we're doing here more than anything going on. So for me, this is, it's by Emerson, but not Ralph Waldo Emerson. Some people think it's Ralph Waldo Emerson, but it's by an engineer named Emerson about the same time. And we know that the coach who knows why beats the coach who knows how. And we also know that the principles that you found all your doing on matter, not the methods, but the principles, which include science as part of what we're going to be, playing around with more and more. So it's also about effort, the ambition versus the without work. It's about that effort, and it's about the coach who knows why beats the coach who knows how. In this case, he says, the man who knows why will always have a job. And so we're constantly in our role at the national level working on the why. So I kept the sailing one in. I can tell you the volleyball one in. I wondered, how many sailing drills do you guys do? And they kind of laughed. And I said, when you type it into Google, you get whatever, 14 million or something. In volleyball, you get over 30 million. So most coaches will come to clinics. I bet we'd have a much larger attendance if I said drills that you can do between now and the end of the virus or something like that. We get hundreds of people showing up. But what we want today to do is keep giving you ideas on how do you think critically and make the drills the most effective. There's a reason when Karch and Doug Beal and John Speraw, our top Olympic coaches, are asked how many drills do you know or do with the national teams, their answer is under 15. Yet as a young coach, I would go out and spend money on Bob Bratton's 300 plus volleyball drills. And when he brought out his next book, 400 plus more drills, oh, I was in heaven. And what I was doing was teaching my kids all these drills and not how to play, because most drills aren't game-like as possible and therefore don't transfer. Not in the PowerPoint per se. I'm going to just say a couple things about diversity in youth and parents. I think the biggest mistake I did as a young coach was ignore the net. You may not realize our national team has 35 nets at the Anaheim Sports Center. Not one, 35. It just so happens that volleyball is played pretty much every third hit over the net. And of course, the rallies that are short start with a serve, which happens to go over the net. So what did I do? I put up the net as a young coach, and I played on half the net. And we played pepper, and I stood in front of the net and I banged balls and I threw balls right and left, and they were diving and flopping all over, and I'm controlling the ball myself, so I'm getting most of the reps. And I completely ignored the net, even though it took me 20 minutes to set it up. So stay away from that error that I made as a young coach as well, and start using the net from the start of practice to the end of practice. Again, you request by sending to john.kessel@usav.org, usavolleyball.org, but usav.org, V as in volleyball. I will send you this research on the culture versus the talent code. The talent code is written by a good friend of mine, Dan, and he and I were talking how culture eats talent for lunch. The talent code is a great book, but culture just eats that talent up. You got to have a healthy culture. So he wrote a different book called The Culture Code. And I think that's unknowingly one of the things I did first at these summer camps at Graceland College that were all over the Midwest. It was we created a culture of learning. And in the camps, how do we make this next session better? We just did it. How can we make it better the next time we do it? And we did it 7 days a week, all summer long. And I will pitch you that if you can create a culture of play in your gym, where they walk in, they don't use their phone, they immediately go onto the court, and if there's just one of them, they start to play 1-on-0 by playing 3 touches and run underneath the net, playing on the other side and run underneath the net, or then, another kid shows up, play 2-on-0 where they're swapping back and forth, or play 1-on-1, 3 hits on the same side. But this culture of playing over the net, not needing any warm-up to do this, gets you better faster. You learn quicker than the kids that young John Kessel made them run around the gym, and then they stretched. And sometimes it was 45 minutes before we started to touch a ball. So don't want to make those mistakes. Oh, nice hand, John. Let's get it to click over here because I can't get my, oh, shoot, we missed Hugh and his whiteboard. So what you're seeing here, of course, is Hugh McCutcheon coaching at the women's side after he won the gold medal as a men's coach. And he's teaching using a whiteboard, and there's words up here on the screen, variants and things that I hope you can take advantage of. But the big question is where is your whiteboard? You see, it's kind of weird to me. You go into any classroom. I mean, after Haiti, we came down to help. the earthquake. My wife and I we helped an orphanage, and within a week they had sitting on sacks of food, but they had a chalkboard up and they were teaching. You become a more effective teacher if your practice objectives are not a secret. If they're up like you see here, so that the players can see it and it's not hidden in some magical book of the coach, you know. So you'll be a more effective teacher if you can use a whiteboard as part of your practice. If you go and look and read some of the teaching methods that John Holt does in music, John Holt, H-O-L-T as it shows here, I think you'll become a better learner. Music is a motor skill. And as he points out in this phrase, you know, people seem to think that I'm learning to play, and then when I'm ready to play, then I start to play. And, you know, it's all woven together. You're constantly learning to play. And so we need to be better at doing that, I think, as a coach from the very beginning. This one's just to make you a more effective mentor, and this is on my office computer. And I can't remember who said the quote, but it's basically that if you answer all these questions before you turn in your paper, before you do your project, before whatever, you'll be able to have a much more effective presentation on a lot of different levels. Yep. Boink. Darn it. I don't like being on a slow internet here. Again, I know how to make a drill really complex, but the game is pretty simple. The ball gets served, it goes over the net, it gets passed once and goes back over in bad volleyball. It gets passed twice and maybe gets dumped or an error in the set, and so it only takes 2 touches before it goes over. But the rest of the time you're seeing the ball be touched 3 times and then go over the net. And then they touch it 3 times and it goes back over the net. And that's what happens in volleyball. At the same time, I can argue, I think pretty strongly that no point is exactly like any other point. But as a young coach, I attempted to make things much better in practice by taking a piece of the game and making it be the solution. I was not getting much transfer according, you know, I'd say, well, I thought we learned it in practice, you know. Transfer occurs when it's as game-like as possible. And that's why you only see about a dozen or so drills at the national team level. But we want to make things as simple as possible so that we can get more learning. Come on. So this is the volleyball sailing version. Volleyball's version is this: 2 kids and a ball, and what happens? No, I'm sorry. Let's make it 4 kids. Yeah. 4 kids and a ball, and what happens? They play. 4 kids and a ball and an adult, and what happens? Sadly, they drill. And that's because, as the great motor learning scientist Richard Schmidt said, most coaches practice for practice, not to perform. They work so that practice looks good, even though when they perform, it's pretty chaotic. How chaotic? Well, I coach 13s, but I watch the national team and look at their data. Karch is still saying that they're right around 48% in system. No, 48% out of system, 52% in system. If the national team is imperfect and out of system, essentially half the time, what do you think my 13s are? It's just like, my system is being constantly out of system, and that's what we need to practice. So in this case, you fill in the blank. Coach, when do we get to blank? And in volleyball, if the kids are saying play, you're not playing enough. That's simply what's going on. Now, another little homework assignment. Google or go to YouTube and type in the words backwards bicycle. This is sort of a big picture thing for me. How did you learn to ride a bike? And how many drills did you do? It's more dangerous than volleyball. Did you go to summer camp? No. Did you do drills? No. Did you do progressions and do pedal right footed for a while and pedal? No. You learn to ride the bike by riding the bike. And yeah, you fall and then you get back up and you keep riding and then you learn to ride. Now that's called intrinsic learning. When you figure it all out yourself, boy, that will stay it's retained, learned much deeper. The worst was young John Kessel, called extrinsic teaching and learning, where I was telling the players the answer. And by doing it that way, they didn't learn it very effectively. And so they always looked at the bench for every answer. What you hopefully picked up a little bit in impact, but what we want you to know is that you become a more effective teacher if you guide their discovery. You know the answer, but you don't tell them the answer. You get them to figure out the answer, guide their discovery. And it's almost as effective as if they learned it completely by themselves. The amazing thing you're going to see when you watch the backwards bicycle, if you haven't seen it before, is that they make one change to his bike. At the front, handlebars go right, and then the wheel goes right. They made it go when handlebars go right, the wheel goes left. That's it. Made one change. It took him 8 months to learn to ride that bike, even though he'd been riding a bike all his life. Because specificity says things are specifically learned. That's why so many of the drills don't transfer, and you go, God, they did well in practice, but it wasn't enough like the game. It didn't have the blockers. It didn't have this. It wasn't using the net and all these things that I did. And I've also kind of reflect and say to myself, shoot, how many tag drills did I do as a young coach or a young player learning? So Brazil's top players, all working with a coach that I know, he shares this information that said, they all said, my first coach was the game, not a coach. And I think that has a lot of interesting and good philosophy. So learning is better when it's taught through stories about facts and things. Motor skill is not taught through story, but you have a lot of things that you want to teach your kids. And it's really, really best done through story rather than just telling them the answer again. Here's Atul Gawande talking about how science in medicine hasn't been doing things as effectively. And this is like from 12 years ago, not about the virus right now. Hugh McCutcheon noticed that, and the whole point is that this is a hammer, not a switch. Things don't just switch. You just keep pounding away until the things start to happen. So take solace in the fact that things don't happen immediately. So we shared guided discovery. This is about variance. We know where we're supposed to pass, and you actually see probably the most number of balls in this slide there. But this is what an Olympic level team does with their serve reception, how far off the net it is, where it is spread out all over. And if that's the Olympic team, what do you think is happening at the 13 and 15-year-old level or whatever? Humans have variance. This bell curve that goes to both sides is why you don't want to put your player right on the net, the setter target, because they have this bell curve of variance and half the balls are going to go over the net. You don't want to serve over the net. You want to serve over a place about 18 inches above the net, really hard and flat. And then when you make this variance, it still clears the net. You don't want to spike the line, because when you're aiming at the line, half the balls go wide. You don't want to set it to the antenna, because half the balls go past the antenna. You got to allow for this variance in humans that you see in this slide. I'm going to save sending to you coaches that are listening. I'm going to send to Lindsay and she can pass it on. The article called Decisions. And if we have time here, because I don't want to go too long, maybe we're doing good on time. I'll tell you the story about regression to the mean, but regression to the mean impacted me the most of anything in coaching. And I'm going to share that at the end. So since we know that that which you teach, you learn, our program has 12-year-olds coaching the 9 and 10-year-olds, not the 18s. Our program has the 14s coaching the 11s. We know that if you teach it, you learn it better. So how much time are you letting your kids do that in practice? Here's how you can do it. You simply have two teams, your 13-1 and 13-2, or your 13 and your 14, and every other one practice a week, twice a month, in other words, they spend out of their 2-hour practice 1 hour coaching the 10 and unders in doubles. Maybe they're even partnered with the team, and you put up the net down the middle, the ribbon, and you get all these little courts going, and the kids play over the net, aka ribbon, or you can buy 4 nets on a rope for like $100, and so it goes right down the middle of your court, and you get all these nets up. After an hour, they have the regular practice. The next Tuesday, the other team does it. The kids that are young are coming every Tuesday for 1 hour. I'm spending 2 hours a month teaching to be a better player by teaching others. And what it does is it fills this pipeline of kids that your kids, if they're 13, can really relate to an 11-year-old. It's only been 2 years since they were 11. I, on the other hand, can't relate very well. And the kids go, what are you going to teach me, old man? You know, I don't get it. So see if you can get that happening in your gym as well. It creates an incredibly good pipeline. So we again talked about this extrinsic and versus intrinsic learning on the bike riding side. But you know, the question is, are you going to be a guide on the side or a sage on the stage? Right now, I'm being the sage on the stage, and I'd rather be guiding by being in your gym and working with this stuff happening. Again, depending on the impact clinic you've had, these are words that I hope you eliminate from your gym. I'm really sensitive to the word try. Kids are given an excuse to not do something when we as coaches say, well, try it. You either do it or you don't. I save the word hate for people like Adolf Hitler. I don't use it for saying I hate vegetables or anything. It's too powerful of a word. The word don't needs to be eliminated from the gym as much as possible, because your brain doesn't register a negative. Again, this is about how does your brain learn more effectively, and the word don't is not part of that process. You just keep saying what you want. getting rid of the word but. You know, Lindsay, you've done a great job here, but what's coming next? Some sort of slam. You just get rid of the word but because they never hear the compliment. What you want to do is say things like, you've done a great job, and I really like that shirt, and they can hear the compliment that you said, and that's going to make you a better coach. Things are not never and always. They're not the worst or the best. I mean, there's one gold medalist in a sport. That's the best. Everybody else is working on their as we said earlier. Now, we do want to use the word yet. So anytime somebody goes, oh, I can't do it, you go, yet. You know, I believe in you. And finally, you know, this is about specificity. They studied that great coach named John Wooden, and they found that 76% of his words in his teaching when he was in the gym were specific. So young John Kessel would say, that's it. Hey, way to go. Oh, good job, good job. And that's not effective. What you have to do is put a comma in and say what the it is. When you say that's it, like I did for years, I want my kids now, which is what they do, because we teach this kind of stuff as part of practice. When I say that's it, they look at me and they go, this it you're talking about, care to be more specific? And you'll be a better teacher. And finally, some of the others that you're seeing here. The first one is what you want to say. What questions do you have? As a young coach, I would say, do you have any questions? And the first one gets them to be part of your process, okay? Oh, shoot, sorry. This is the USOC ADM slide that, for whatever reason, jumped backwards and is now not coming through. Come on, I just want to go back a slide. All right, so we know that biology doesn't know birthdays. So this whole American development model, I think, is summarized by this phrase: keep as many kids as long as possible in as healthy as an environment as possible. You can also just say decide slowly. So that's homework for you guys to learn even more when you get back there. Again, you know, there's all this, why do you coach volleyball? I work with the 97% the most. And because they're not going to be going to the Olympics, what is it that you're doing this for? What is your coaching philosophy? You know, for me, it's to develop amazing leaders. That's why I do what I do, even here today. I hopefully am helping you become also a better leader in the Great Plains region. Just a food for thought, you know, when you keep saying, I believe, and that doesn't make you a better coach. It's what your behavior is. And this is an adaptation of Haim Junot that is part of Impact. When I first wrote the very first Impact manual, 67 pages long back in 1988, we knew we wanted to have impact. And then we found this poem from a teacher and we changed it to coach. And it's true that, you know, you influence things way more than you realize. Yeah, you know, just think about it. Not in the slides. Your influence is never neutral. Jerry Lynch taught me that. Make it positive. Stop being like I was as a young coach and making it negative. So I've worked with probably about 20 different sports, professional level or Olympic level. This is my motor learning session at the end of a day with the Cleveland Indians. And you have this chapter in Impact. And so you can take advantage of it or go back and look at that section. But, you know, again, this is a learning competition. And so motor learning principles and how do we learn faster that I've been sharing, and other things are up here. And you see the don't word and the try words being slashed off, and feedback and all these other things that we don't have time to do here, but it's part of CAP as well. But you got a good session of that in impact, hopefully. This is a picture of our property, by the way. 9,000 feet, you can, and we've got about 20 teepees. But only in the last couple of years, I've stopped doing as much goal setting, you know, basically down to 0. And instead we talk, think about it. Does your club say, your 18 national team say, oh, I want to qualify for nationals? Well, every 18 national team is doing that. Every 12 national team is saying the same thing. So that part of the goal setting isn't what I want to be thinking about. What I want to know is what you're going to do. So if we focus more on the commitment and not necessarily the goal, I think we'll have more effective learning. If you haven't been to this, Volleyball Coaches and Trainers, it's a closed group. Back in 2019, we had 19,000. Now we're at 20,000. There's another drill-based version called Volleyball Teachers and Trainers. VCT is for coaches and trainers. And the opening slide, or the opening session to that, when you join, it, you know, points out that we're here to say what you mean. We want you to mean what you say, but we don't want you to be mean when you say it. And if you are, we warn you once, and then if you keep being mean, we kick you out of the group. Formed it with a guy named Brian Swente after I did a summer camp for him in Germany. And I expected a couple hundred people to be chatting and talking. My God, we're almost at 21,000, and it's closed. You're going to have to say, yes, I'm a volleyball coach. Yes, I'm interested in all this other stuff. So I told USA Sailing to do their own version of it. Oops, don't go again, please. Thank you. Shoot, it did. All right. So I love humor. I can't get through life without it. And hopefully I picked on myself a little bit here, but this is my humor information page that you now have in the slideshow, and you got your phone, grab it and take a picture of it. I highly recommend that you go watch It's Not About the Nail, especially if you're married or have a serious relationship. I highly recommend that you go to the USA Canada It's Just a Game videos if you haven't ever used them, and more. Oh, we just jumped to heuristics. Again, I'm going to send Lindsay this article, the 25 heuristics, and to get it out to those of you that are attending here today. Great stuff about learning, all captured on one page. These are my favorite links to podcasts and stuff. So again, either take a quick screen grab of it or know that this is being recorded and you can look at it again at another time. Come on to the next one. You can do it. Come on, you can move. There we go. Probably the last time I do a clinic like this for Great Plains, so I wanted to make sure that, like it's sailing, that the books that impacted me the most are something that you can see and work on. Again, anything by They Call Me by John Wooden is fantastic. Billy Allen and John Mayer and the Coach Your Brains Out group did a great book, and those are the two books there. Motor Learning Performance Anything by Brene Brown is really, really valuable too. So lots more chances to learn beyond here. And hopefully the next thing is going to show you how to reach me. We'll just jump to one more slide. Yeah. So my blog carries a lot of things I've learned the hard way, especially in the last 15 years. I'm going to take some time now to talk about regression in the mean, like I said, because it's one of the most impactful things in this article when I send it to you, decisions. Hopefully you'll get the same kind of whoa out of it that I did back in the 80s. So a guy named Daniel Kahneman, who as an economist or as mathematician, economy guy, he a psychologist too, pretty bright guy. He was talking to the Israeli fighter pilot instructors, not the pilots, but the instructors, about how to be a better coach. And he talked about how praise works and punishment doesn't work. And I'm using this in volleyball, the way I see teams in a timeout doing wind sprints or push-ups or whatever, or at the end of a tournament having to run laps around the events, the qualifier gym or whatever. And all these coaches that don't understand how they're being fooled by a regression of the mean because they think it works. And one of the pilot instructors raised his hand and said, Dr. Kahneman, with all due respect, what you're saying is for the birds. I appraise my pilots after a good landing, and invariably they do worse. And when they do a bad landing, I chew them out in the tradition of my military, and invariably they do better. Don't tell me that punishment doesn't work. My experience contradicts you. Kahneman said it was the most exciting moment of his life at that time, to find out that these great coaches, teachers, instructors were being fooled by regression of the mean. And in a condensed version, there's a great example of how people will choose things totally differently, even though they're identical in fact. The way it's worded will make you pick differently. In this case, for volleyball, let's say I pass normally 5 out of 10. And all of a sudden you see me in a tournament or in practice do 10 in a row. Should you praise me, punish me, or ignore me? And my answer would be praise you. What mathematically is going to happen in the next 10, if your average was 5 out of 10, and you do 10 in a row, the next 10 will probably be 5 out of 10. Not 0 out of 10, but 5 out of 10, because that's your average. Geez, the same people are trying to reach me again. Why? Who is this guy? So long story short, the flip side is why I'm taking time to share this. The flip side is that when I was a young coach and somebody did 0 out of 10, I could see myself saying, time out, get over here and sit on the bench. Sub, get over there and sit on the bench. You're so much better than this. What's wrong with you today? And give me some push-ups and all this other stuff when I was a really young coach. And what happens after they do 0 out of 10 in the next 10? And the answer is 5 out of 10. So what the pilots would see, instructors would see, what coaches see is when they suck and then you punish, they get better. But it's not because of the punishment. They're being fooled by regression in the mean. It's because of the math that happens in humans and other things in life, you know. So this article hopefully will give you a big impact on that. Would love to see some questions in the chat box or anything if you have any regarding what we've been talking about. I want to honor the hour that we said we'd do, especially with the fact that I took a couple minutes to get started because I couldn't get this thing to work right. But if there's no questions, I'm going to give you a chance to be done a couple minutes early, but happy to, I don't know if we see him here or, I see a chat box that I can see Lindsay Smith to all audience. We can see both, but if this has made enough sense and you're already off watching the backwards bicycle or something, maybe I did my job.
There's a
Anything,
question in
Lindsay?
the question box asking what the webinar was you mentioned earlier.
It's called The Game Trains the Brain.
Okay.
So if you type in The Game Trains the Brain, Steve Bain, and volleyball, it'll pop up so you can watch it. That's 75 minutes or so.
Okay.
The Game Trains the Brain. If not, hey, we're on time. And look forward to sharing, Lindsay, these things that you can pass out to the coaches that are on, and
Absolutely.
appreciate the chance to share and get this recorded for everybody else.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this. We appreciate you providing this for our region.
Hopefully you learned something.
Absolutely.
All right. Keep learning, still learning. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
And stay safe, everybody.